Renting versus buying. The internet gets this wrong. So I just watched this huge interview with Ben Felix. You can see it here, talking about investing and how to set yourself up financially, but he talks a lot about renting versus buying. And honestly, I think a lot of what he said is smart, but I also think that some of his arguments are incomplete, overly theoretical, or just don't reflect how people actually behave in real life. So I want to break them down right here. So this is going to cover where I agree, where I disagree, and what people completely miss in the rent versus buy conversation. So in this first section, I want to talk about the biggest things that he got right. And first off, buying a home is not automatically a better financial decision. That's true. People romanticize home ownership way too much. A house is a place to live, a lifestyle decision, and sometimes it's an investment. But it's not always a great one. And one thing he absolutely nailed: most people dramatically underestimate the true cost of owning a house. Let's cover the hidden cost of homeownership. First off is mortgage interest. Mortgage interest is real, especially if you buy at high interest rates and stretch out loan over 30 years. Now, where I think the conversation needs more nuance is this: if you aggressively pay down the house, that changes the equation completely. Because once that thing's paid off, now you have leverageable equity, stability, and reduced monthly expenses. And that matters. And I think people also misunderstand mortgage payments. Not all of it is throwing money away. Part of that payment is buying ownership interest in an asset over time. The longer you stay in the house and the faster you pay it down, the more that equation changes in your favor. Next are property taxes, and property taxes are absolutely real. You never get that money back directly, but I also think people forget something important. Renters are also paying property taxes too. The landlord just builds those into the cost of the rent. So yes, the owner sees the bill directly, but the renters are still indirectly paying it every month. Maintenance cost. And this one people really underestimate. Roofs, HVAC systems, foundation issues, plumbing, landscape, appliances. Stuff breaks constantly. And honestly, if you refuse to learn basic DIY skills, renting might actually be the better option for you. Because if you call a contractor for every little issue, you'll absolutely bleed money. But here's the part that nobody talks about anymore. Owning a home can actually force you to develop real-world skills. And we live in a wonderful time where we could pay somebody $300 to replace something and fix it, or they could fix it themselves in 45 minutes with a YouTube video. YouTube has changed the game. Need to patch drywall or replace a faucet, fix a runny toilet, install flooring, replace a ceiling fan, troubleshoot your AC. There's step-by-step tutorials for almost everything now. And once you fix one thing, you realize, wait, I can actually do this. And that compounds confidence. And the savings compound too, which you could invest as well. And the difference between a homeowner who learns maintenance and one who hires a contractor for every little thing can literally be hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. And honestly, there's something even bigger than money here. You can teach your kids this stuff too. You can show your son or your daughter how to use tools, how to solve problems, how plumbing works or how electricity works, how to take care of something that they own. And that matters. That's generational knowledge that our parents and grandparents passed down to us. And a lot of people never learn basic homeownership growing up anymore. And honestly, I think that's part of why home ownership feels so overwhelming now. So yes, maintenance cost is real, but it can also become an education, confidence, self-reliance, and something that you pass down to your kids, which is the part that never shows up in a spreadsheet. Now, there's emergency costs, and this is where an emergency fund matters. Owning a house without reserves is dangerous because eventually something's gonna go wrong and it'll break or it'll flood or it will fail, the list goes on. That's not optional, that's part of the game. Now, yes, having cash reserves has an opportunity cost, which Ben will argue could be used to go into an index fund. But financial stability matters too, and every dollar can't go into an index fund. You can't optimize every dollar to be the absolute maximizing while ignoring some risks. So then he talks about renovation spending. And one thing Ben said, particularly that I agree with, is homeowners rarely just repair, they upgrade. And that's true. Let's say you replace the countertops, or you replace the kitchen cabinets, or you fix the flooring, or you get new lights fixtures. Lifestyle inflation absolutely happens. But when some of these renovations happen, they genuinely will increase the value of the house. So if you are spending money on things that will help the value of your house, that can improve your equity and help your resale value, or the speed of how it resells, or maybe you want to rent it down the road, that can help the rental value, or just improve your quality of life. So I think that conversation needs a little bit more balance. So in section 3 is where I want to talk about where the real argument of renting over owning kind of falls apart. And one thing I think gets exaggerated is the opportunity cost argument. The idea that, well, instead of buying a house, you could invest your down payment into an index fund. Let's be honest about how people actually behave. In America, most first-time home buyers are not putting 20% down. Most are putting nothing, or 3 or 5, maybe 10%. And a lot of people are not investing the difference. If they have a windfall of $20,000, a lot of people are going and buying a car or some other depreciating asset, or they're just spending it frivolously. And that's the reality. So the theory sounds good, but I think human behavior comes into play and it wouldn't actually happen. Now, Ben has something called the 5% rule. And this is where I think the internet advice gets a little disconnected from reality. That the 5% rule says, take the purchase price of the home, multiply that by 5%, divide it by 12, and that would get you what your monthly rent should be. If your 5% rule comes out here on a purchase and your rental is lower than that, then you should probably rent. But in Kansas City, this kind of falls apart pretty fast, because a $300,000 house here, that's usually a pretty decent house. You can get a lot of house for $300,000 in a good neighborhood, nice condition. And like for $1,250, which is what the 5% rule would say, you're not getting an equivalent house. Not a chance. You're probably more like $1,700, maybe $1,500, but possibly even $2,000 plus utilities. So yes, the math works cleaner on like as it goes up because that number gets bigger, but in affordable markets where buying often becomes much more competitive. So the thing that people never talk about is forced savings. And here's the big thing nobody talks about. A mortgage is forced savings. Most people are not disciplined investors. They say, I'll rent and invest the difference. So instead they buy cars, vacations, subscription, random Amazon packages, and then 15 years later they have nothing. If renting is going to outperform buying financially, the investing has to happen on the front side, automatically. At the same time that the rent gets paid, the investment happens. Otherwise, the entire argument starts to fall apart. And Ben talks about mobility versus wealth building, and here's where I absolutely agree with Ben Phil. If you move constantly, buying is usually a bad financial decision because you got realtor fees, repairs, moving costs, transaction costs, and they're gonna eat your equity fast. That's real, but I also think people exaggerate this idea that buying a house uniquely traps you. People pass on opportunities all the time because of pets, relationships, schools, family, comfort, routines. Life always has this trade-off. And there's another side to this conversation too. A young person can house hack. They could buy a duplex, rent rooms, build equity, slowly create a rental portfolio. And by their early 30s, they may own multiple properties that have a large amount of equity and would have outperformed the index fund. That happens all the time. So yes, you have to sacrifice flexibility, but every wealth building strategy requires sacrifice. A lot of people treat their house as a bank account. And one thing I think he touched on but didn't fully explore is a house becomes a financial tool, and people use equity for emergencies, businesses, medical issues, opportunities, consolidating debt. Now that can become dangerous. A lot of people abuse HELOCs and over leverage themselves, but pretending that the house has no financial utility beyond appreciation, I think misses reality. Now, I do agree with him on the thing that people cherry pick crazy appreciation stories where you hear about the guy who got $50,000 over on a house he bought for $100,000. Like the story, my grandpa bought a house in 1970 and now it's worth $1 million. Okay, but timing matters, market matters, and real estate doesn't always go up forever, even though it seems like it does. But leverage is powerful, and real estate is one of the only places average people can access large-scale leverage relatively safely. Small down payments, large asset exposure, and that's how middle-class wealth gets built. So renting isn't throwing money away, and I actually agree with him on that point too. People say renting is throwing money away, but honestly, lots of things are unrecoverable expenses. Owning a car versus Ubering everywhere, eating out versus cooking at home, traveling versus going camping. Life costs money, and the real question is, what are you getting in return? Flexibility, stability, freedom, equity, convenience, that's the better conversation. So where do I land on all this? The real answer is it depends on the person. If you value flexibility, move often, hate maintenance, and are disciplined enough to invest consistently, renting is an absolute win. If you throw in the right investment strategy with index funds, you can have the best of both worlds. But if you want stability, are handy, stay in one area, buy smart, use leverage responsibly, buying can be one of the best wealth building tools available. So my final take is I think Ben Felix gives incredibly smart financial advice, and a lot of his principles are sound, but sometimes internet finance conversations become too theoretical, and you gotta take in the real life equation, human behaviors and local markets and human discipline more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. Because the best financial strategy in theory is useless if people don't actually follow it, whether it's renting and investing in index funds or buying and building up equity. So I want to hear from you guys. Would you rather rent and invest the difference or buy and build equity? And if you own a home, tell me honestly, what repair absolutely humbled you? I can tell you plumbing is my worst enemy. But if you want to check out this podcast, which I think is very valuable, I'll link it.